Welcome, students, and today we're working on Chapter 3 in Understanding Business, Doing Business in Global Markets. Don't forget to have a pen and some pencil or something to write with today. Take some notes. All right, chapter contents. The dynamic global market, why trade with other nations, getting involved in global trade, strategies for reaching global markets, forces affecting trading in global markets, trade protectionism, and the future of global trade. The learning objectives we're going to cover are: 1, discuss the importance of the global market and the roles of comparative advantage and absolute advantage in global trade. 2, explain the importance of importing and exporting and understand key terms used in global business. 3, illustrate the strategies used in reaching global markets and explain the role of multinational corporations. 4, evaluate the forces that affect trading in global markets. 5, debate the advantages and disadvantages of trade protectionism. And 6, discuss the changing landscape of the global market and the issue of offshore outsourcing. Okay, so the dynamic global market consists of over 90% of companies that globally do business. And it's very important to have an international experience. It's, employees, students, if you haven't had any international experience, it's time to get it. It'll broaden your business opportunities and your employment opportunities. So U.S. organizations are also expanding abroad, both importing, that's buying products from another country, bringing them in, and exporting, selling products to another country. So we're known, the U.S., as being the 3rd largest exporting nation in the world. So that means we have a lot of products to sell. Currently looking at the world population by content, it's good to know where population is located. So here we have North America, South America, showing all the different continents. And inside you can see the percentages. So North America, it includes Alaska and Canada with us, and Mexico. So we're considered to have 7.4%. And in comparison, look at here, Asia 60.2%, quite a large difference in population. So they have a need for more products than we do at times. Okay, so why trade with other nations? Well, countries that have a large and abundance of natural resources like Venezuela, and we saw South America there, or Iraq, they need technological resources from other countries like Japan. So Japan produces cell phones, computers, servers, all the equipment for technology, primarily, compared to the United States by far. Even though we may have licensing or patents, they're made in Japan. Global trade helps countries to produce what they make best. And that's why we take and ask for help with other countries to make things. And this is what we come to understand as what's called free trade. And that's where services and products go back and forth without political and economic barriers. Now, I say that we have trade compliance requirements, and there are times when there are embargoes imposed. And we'll get into that more in the legal end of things. But generally speaking, we have no boundaries that keep us from trading right now. Now, of course, we're in a pandemic, and so we don't have a lot of flights going to other countries, especially China. But if we weren't in the pandemic, it would still be free and things would be flowing better. So we look at the pros and cons of free trade. And over here on the left are the pros. And it's very important to look at these and understand them. let me get make sure my mouse is out here for you so you can see things. And over here, what we're looking at is that there are quite a bit of customers available for services, over 7 billion potential customers right here. And then there's also lots of productivity, allowing countries to produce goods and services. With what we talk about is known as a comparative advantage, and we'll talk about that more in a bit here. And then definite global competition with less costly imports, which helps bring the prices down. So inflation does not make a break, curtail economic growth. And then we have what's known, of course, free trade, where innovation helps us build bridges and more opportunity for working with other countries. Even there's always competitive challenges, it still is a door opener to do work. An uninterrupted flow of capital. Now, what I know is you have to be able to have capital. So then there's an uninterrupted flow, which helps. And that helps keep interest rates lower when our economy is flowing better. Now, the con side, the negative side, is domestic workers. And those are, generally speaking, manufactured-based jobs. And we're talking about local people, domestic, can lose their jobs if we outsource or allow other countries to take over. And that's not good for us. So let's see here now. Then the workers may be forced to accept pay cuts as a result of these things. And that threatens those employees because their jobs may move to lower global markets, such as going to a third world country, anything outside the United States. And then the operations of the business move. And this happens sometimes where there is a loss of service jobs and growing numbers of white-collar jobs instead of hands-on jobs, manufacturing, production, agricultural. And then, of course, we have issues with domestic companies losing comparative advantage when competitors are able to be advanced in production in something that we aren't. And that, again, then it goes outside the country and the loss of opportunity for low-wage countries to work. I mean, employees here versus giving them the work in third world countries because they're saving money by sending it outside the U.S. So what is comparative advantage, okay? A country should sell to other countries those products that it produces more efficiently. Now, I love this word efficiency. And buy from countries whose products that it cannot produce as effectively or efficiently where you're at. Now, we have no problem saying we can't do that. Some companies will go to all lengths to try to make something happen, and you see a lot of those countries break financially, loss of employees, because they're not able to make the product happen. And then we have what's known as absolute advantage, where there's a monopoly, and we see this in the energy, utilities a lot, that slows other countries down in that area, but it gives them the upper edge when they have the ability to make something more efficiently than another country. Importing goods and services. So we always suggest students maybe take a summer abroad, and this helps them to learn about the different products, how activities are working in other countries, what kind of services are available that maybe aren't available here. And it's really good to see that there can be differences in how products are made, how it works with other countries to do services. So to get that experience is really beneficial to go out and do that. So exporting goods and services will only help us by boosting our economy, especially exporting. And then we figure that it generates approximately 7,000 US jobs annually. And so that brings in $1 billion with exports when we do that. Get a sip of water here. So how do we measure global trade? Well, we have to look at the balance of trade. And we do this the same as we were talking about the gross domestic product last chapter. And it's done during periods of times, sometimes quarterly, every 3 months. We have 4 quarters in a year, or semi-annually, that's twice a year, or annually. We want to see how the flow is going in and out. So trade surplus, favorable, increase, and of course deficit is unfavorable, a decrease in imports. Balance of payments. How money is flowing in and out of this country, in all countries? Are we making money? And what's really beneficial is during certain times of the year, such as with tourism, our flow of income is higher. So usually we see it during special seasons, or let's say, for instance, summer. Our summer comes at a different time than some other countries' summers. So that may increase their economy like it might ours during those periods. The same thing when we do foreign aid, military expenditures, and foreign investments. There's a flow, and if you look at each country's tracking of these things, you'll see when it increases and decreases. So we want to look for the favorable balance when money is flowing into a country, and then also notice when it's unfavorable, so the lows and the highs. Something that's very bad for the US, we don't allow it, it's prohibited, it's a concept called dumping. And the first time this happened was when China dumped steel in the United States at a lower price than charged in the producing country. And we feel that's really unethical and illegal. They shouldn't be doing that. And we also found to learn that Brazil was doing the same thing. They were both fined for this, and so we don't see this happening like we used to. When we look at the largest exporting nations, it's really good to see the ones in blue are the largest, being us. We do the most amount of exporting, but also there's a little country here, and I'm not sure what we're looking at on these two, but the top US trading partners with the US is India, and then both trading and exporting nations are in green. So it'd be Canada, Mexico, and then we have the British Isles, United Kingdom area, and France, and then Germany, and Italy, and then we have China. So we have strategies for reaching global markets. And I'm going to define these terms in a minute, but I just want to look at this part initially, because the bottom line is amount of commitment, control, risk, and profit potential. So on the left side is the least amount of risk and the least control and the least profit and potential, with the most being to the right. And when we think about different kinds of businesses, we are looking at businesses that do licensing, those that are exporting, the franchising, contract manufacturing, internal joint ventures and strategic alliances, and then foreign direct investments. Those are the most riskful. Excuse me. All right. So look at licensing here. So when we're looking at licensing, what it allows is, let's say we're building a bridge with a foreign country to produce a product in exchange for royalties or fees. And that's a wonderful way of doing things. They do all the work, you get the benefits. You still own the product, and it's a great deal. You get all those revenues, and then you hardly have to spend any money or time to do the production of those products. That other country does it for you. On the other hand, then we start thinking about where we were in that chart. So we're at licensing, now exporting. with that. The EACs provide hands-on exporting assistance. So when we look at these individuals, they are like our brokers, agents, exporting agents that help to do this work. Really important to have a relationship with them. If you don't, you need to build one. And then those who are engaged direct or indirect exporting versus direct import exporting, based on matching buyers with sellers. So brokers and agents do this work for us, and the ETCs help build that bridge. So you actually just stay at your office, they contact you, you go out and they go out and do the work for you, and they bring those people to you. And it's really helpful. It takes care of all the customs offices, the documentation, and the conversions. Franchising. Well, we know that term really well, franchising. We see it with Domino's Pizza right here, Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's. Well, when we have an ownership of initial franchise, that's part of building another relationship. McDonald's is huge with franchising outside the United States. And it really, the risk in it is so minimal compared to going into large investments, foreign investments. Franchising, you get educated by the business. Some of them have schools you go to. You just need to know how to adapt your product to the country you're serving. And in some cases, it may be the look, it may be the taste, it may be the names based on the countries. So now when we think about contract manufacturing, a foreign company's production of private label goods. So when we think about private labels, it's almost like when you think about wines, right? It's specific to that region, in that domestic area of that country. And usually you want to make sure you have a trademark for it, brand name, and to build the brand for that business product so that you have the ability for outsourcing. And then you have contract manufacturing, allowing a company to experiment in a new market. And that can be tricky at times. It could, when you're doing contracting, you're not the one doing the work. But you have to be careful that you don't have a lot of heavy startup costs. It can get very expensive because you're expending money for them to do the work, such as, let's say, a manufacturing plant. And then there's a temporarily meeting and unexpected increase in orders from out of nowhere. And are you able to handle that? And you'll have to hire more people to help you. International joint ventures, bringing two or more companies together. Usually we're talking about different countries. One of the most well-known one is Toyota, and I'm trying to remember the other automobile organization that came together with Toyota. Mercedes and Volvo ventured together, a joint venture. That's a better one. And there's great benefits, but there's also some risk. One of the benefits of sharing expenses for technology, you also share the risk. You're going to have some things to take a look at, like communications, technology, blending things together. And then you have a shared market now to work with, and you have two groups of people in management who will be working together instead of one group. And when it's a joint venture, it's done intentionally. It's not like someone was pushed on someone, but they decide to work together for a major project, which is very important. It also helps bring you into new markets where foreign companies are not always allowed. Sometimes you find yourself, if you're building a bridge with another company, that your product may not be as welcome as you think it is there. But when you do it with a country that's already there, then they have a door opener. Strategic alliance. So now this is set up for long-term purposes. It doesn't mean you're going to be with this country, I would call it going to bed with a country for a long period of time, but it is for a period of time to help build the competitive market advantages, and they're really great things to do at times. You don't always have the shared costs, nor the risk or the management or the profits, which isn't good because you want the profits. So you need to consider what perspective you're going to come from. Alliances, though, give you a door opener for the marketplace, capital, making money, and definitely technical experience in a different country, because they already have theirs implemented. You're going to bridge with theirs. Foreign direct investment, FDI. So this is about purchasing property and businesses in foreign nations. If you are not using to doing this, you really need to make sure that you have somebody you can work with who knows the language and knows how the financial structure is there for doing real estate investment, because it can get very tricky. Even if you are buying and selling stocks, that's another something you have to worry about, because exchange rates, contracts, details in contracts are very important to understand. A foreign subsidy. So a country, a company owned by a foreign country by another company called the parent company. Let me say that again. A company owned in a foreign country by another company is called the parent company. Multinational corporation, and this is part of foreign direct investment also, when an organization manufactures and markets intentionally in different countries right off the bat, and so they have multinational stock ownership and multinational management. So it's much broader. The intent was to be a corporation across different nations. So that one will have a lot of bridges that are already established for them to do the work they're doing. And it's true, not all global businesses are multinational. Some only are in some other global countries, not all. So, sovereign wealth funds, SWFs. These are investments that are owned strictly by governments, holding large stakes in foreign countries. So let's say, for instance, the United Nations or the World Health Organization is seeking to help fund a project. But the thing is that government they seek it from is only the one who can control how that money comes and goes. Even though they're asked to participate, it's still that government that controls how that money is used. So it needs to really be defined in the breakdown for the use of funding when another government invests in another country. It's very interesting. It does happen. We see it happen. We do it in the US. We fund China a tremendous amount. Because you want to make sure that they're not used for things like geopolitical objectives, gaining control of strategic national resources, or obtaining sensitive technologies. So there has to be guidelines and requirements implemented in those contracts so that nobody's hurt by these funds that are invested there. So let's take a look at some of the largest multinational corporations in the world. And of course, here in the United States is Walmart. And then we go to China with State Grid, totally different kind of company. China National Petroleum, Sinopec Group in China, the Royal Dutch Shell, which is oil in the Netherlands, and then ExxonMobil here back in the United States, Volkswagen in Germany, and Toyota Motors in Japan. And of course, we have Apple here in the US. And then BP stands for British Petroleum Oil Company. And they do the most amount of drilling for oil is out of Great Britain. So what are the forces affecting trade in global markets? And when we start to look at this first, we look at the socio-cultural forces. And we really need to pay attention to them. So what are social structures, religion, manners and customs, values and attitudes, language, personal communications? This is how we interact, right? Social, cultural. And I believe, let me move forward to the next slide. And these are the things we need to look at, you know, how we're communicating. Did we say that? You know, there's terms that we in the United States don't realize may be offensive or maybe said wrong. So let's just look at these. Let's start at the top with Coors Brewing Company. Put its slogan, turn it loose, which means into Spanish is translated as suffer from diarrhea. So we don't want to make the mistake of saying turn it loose for something we're selling in Mexico. We have to make sure that terminology is written right. PepsiCo used the translation, Chinese translation, come alive, you're in the Pepsi generation, but there it reads, Pepsi brings you your ancestors back from the dead. Not good, not good. KFC's finger licking good is bite your fingers off. And then Purdue Chicken, it takes a strong man to make it chicken tender. It takes an aroused man to make a chicken affectionate. And last, the saying that there was quite a glitch of by Electric, a Scandinavian vacuum manufacturer was trying to sell products in the US with the slogan, nothing sex like an Electrolux. So you got to be very careful how we say things. Not only how we say things, how we come across physically. Customs in different countries are very different. And I believe I have another slide here about translation. Banff Airlines, fly in leather means fly naked. Siri, Apple, can really mess things up at times. The term for, I don't think this is quite right. Siri's Apple's digital assistant iPhone is a common slang term for butt in Japanese, so we want to be careful there. In Italy, Schweppes, which is a tonic water, was meant to say, misinterpreted as Schweppes toilet water. And Nokia's line of Plumia phones is Spanish for prostitute. See how this can go bad? So there's so many more. We need to look at how we physically act in public. And I highly recommend you get some cultural training. So you don't want to cross your arms by facing someone. In Turkey, it's very rude to do, but it also makes somebody think you're being angry with them. Don't do that. Keep your arms down. Don't put them in your pockets. In the Middle Eastern countries, you don't eat or shake hands with the left hand. It is considered unclean. So if you're left-handed, think this through, reach out with your right hand. And if you can't eat right-handed, try your best. or excuse yourself for eating with your right hand. I mean, your right hand instead of your left, and they'll understand. In India, never pat someone's head. Shouldn't be doing it anyway. It's very pleasant to touch somebody else's head publicly. It's inappropriate, but it means it's where your soul is kept in India, is up here. So not good to do. Brazil, your meeting may not start in time because punctuality isn't important there. Same thing with Mexico. They sleep a lot, take a lot of breaks, and they take their time. So this is something to be very aware of. There's other countries who have a different time clock than US do, individuals. Another thing to be concerned about, let me get a sip of water here, is the exchange rate. So you want to know what the value of the dollar is no matter where you're going. And it can change a lot. So high value of the dollar, that means it's trading for more than the foreign currency, which means their money has less value. A low value of the dollar is not worth the same as their money, what's considered a dollar. That means it's less, and then foreign goods then will cost us more. So high value is cheaper, low value is more expensive. And then floating. This happens daily, sometimes by the hour. So you have to watch your exchange rates, depending on the country. You will pay a fee for exchanging American currency for foreign currency. It can be very expensive depending on the country. So you want to make sure you know what those fees are and you're not stuck with paying exorbitant fees. Devaluation. So when it's lowered based on the nation's currency relative to other currencies. So it's a double comparative devaluation twice. And then counter trading, bartering. We love this term, bartering and trading. We see it in the marketplaces a lot. It isn't stopped, it still exists, but understanding how to do it. You know, I'll do this for that, you know, or you're gonna provide services for goods or services for services. You need to know what's appropriate in what country to do that. Then we go towards the legal and regulatory forces. As I mentioned, different countries have different ways of seeing things. And so there is no equal global system of laws. Every country has different ways of looking at their laws. So this can be difficult at times. And it's important to understand these, like we have porting fees, import and exporting fees. So when a product lands here in the United States, you're going to be paying fees. That doesn't mean you're going to pay the same fee when you export, nor when you have a landing in a different country. So you need to find out what the rules are and what the laws and the fees are. And you have to follow them. If you don't, it may be considered illegal, unethical in another country. It might cost you extra money. You might be fined. You also may not be allowed to do it anymore. It can be considered like a pirate because you're trying to be unethical about your behavior. Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, and Transparency International, flight to end corruption and bribery in foreign markets. And they have had not as much success, but you know, we need to pay attention to this. If we are allowing unethical and illegal behavior, then we get caught up in it. And it's something you don't want to have happen because it can stop you from being able to do business with another country and maybe many others because the word gets around. And that brings us to corruption, right? And I mentioned it in last chapter. a little bit about how Somalia is #1 as a corrupt country, most corrupt. So Sudan, North Korea, Syria, Yemen, and then Sudan again, and Libya and Afghanistan, Venezuela, and Iraq. And you have to be very careful because you don't want to get caught up in these countries with problems. It could cost you your life, maybe even your families. They are known for not being good people that are corrupt business people there. So let's take a look at the physical and environmental forces now. When we're talking about these countries have transportation and storage systems to make international distribution difficult or impossible. So part of the movement of your product and where it lands and how it stays there can be very difficult. You may be shipping something in and have nowhere for it to go, and that may mean it may not get off the barge or ship that you're bringing it in on, or you may be stuck renting a facility because it doesn't have anywhere to go. Technologies may not be as accessible at the moment. You know, we think about everybody must have a cell phone. That's not always true. So communications, how to link up, who has what technologies to be able to do business. And we're growing in leaps and bounds, as you well know, especially today, like with Zoom, as we've watched with the pandemic. We have much easier ways of communicating, but if you don't have a laptop, if you don't have internet connection, you can't do any of this, or if you don't have a cell phone. So you're slowed down quite a bit in making business happen. Trade protectionism. All right, when the government has regulations limiting import of goods and services. And there are times where we need to have them, where we have what's called quotas, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. You know, sometimes there has to be a balance so that too many products don't come in all at once, or services, or the building of manufacturing plants and all. So what happens is that they impose tariffs, and we have different kinds: protective tariffs and revenue tariffs. Protective is to slow down the product itself, and revenue is to control the money. We see this with China a lot. They get a lot of tariffs, more than anyone. You know, we had the embargo with Cuba, which was lifted. The embargo means none at all. And we've had them with other countries, and they were temporary and short-termed, nothing like Cuba's though. It was 1952, 53, somewhere in there when it was imposed. No, I'm sorry, in the 50s. So have to consider that, you know, if something were to come up. Now that was a communistic state, by the way, where they didn't want to interact with anyone else. And really they got frozen in time as a result of that. If anyone's had the chance to go to Cuba, they will still find that they're still driving cars from the 50s there. Household appliances maybe from the 50s still. Now the embargo was lifted a couple years back. I think it's been about 8 years now, 9 years, somewhere in there. And it's a good thing for Cuba and for us to build relationships with them. So here we are, the import quota. So what can come up for this is that they're told there's only so much that they can import during a period of time. And it depends on what that product or service is, but they can't go any higher than whatever it is. And as I mentioned, embargoes, talked about that just now, such as with Cuba. And when we think about the importing of products and jobs, there's also the outsourcing. it's very important, to think about, should governments protect their industries by placing tariffs on imported products? Why or why not? And this is a picture from another country that says, stop, we don't want the products. Okay. World Trade Organization, WTO. It has 164 member nations, and they have a purpose, a singular purpose. It's to oversee cross-border trade issues and global business practices. So everyone's very well known of this organization in Geneva. They handle all the international activities between these different countries that do work together. If you have a problem with a product, with a company you're working with, let's just say the product itself, let's say in getting some business done, you go to the World Trade Organization and they can help you. But you got to make sure that you also understand the tariffs that may be involved and trade with GATT. So it's called the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT. It came about in 1948, and that's when World Trade Organization was created for negotiating mutual reduction in trade restrictions. So make sure there's not a lot of trade restrictions, but there's time where there needs to be help with those, and the World Trade Organization assists with that. All right, so here we are, the common market. And that is countries that are broken down into what's called trading blocks. So you have the European Union, the EU, Mercosur, and I just spell it out. It's ASEAN, ASEAN, and then COMESA. And each one involves countries within regions. And let's take a look. I think I have a map. Here it is. So the European Union itself, the EU, and this is actually good. This is current from 2016. And it's broken down here, members of the European Union, non-members, and then applicants, those interested in joining, and those exiting. So it talks about exiting, and that is United Kingdom and part of Ireland. Now, that's not all of the United Kingdom. This is actually England and Scotland, okay, right here. And this is Wales right here. It's not going. So England and Scotland. Now, England decided to go, and I don't think Scotland went. This area here is of Dublin in Ireland, and I'm not sure if they went or not. But it was last year, in 2019, when England decided to leave. We have what's known as NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. So it includes Canada, the United States, and Mexico for us to trade freely amongst us here without tariffs or boundaries on trade, which is a very good thing. And then there's a Central American Free Trade Agreement, CAFTA, and that includes Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. And that came into being in 2005. So there was even more free trade there. So NAFTA eliminated trade barriers, and facilitate cross-border movement of goods and services, as I mentioned, helps promote conditions of fair competition. So when we start to see one of the three countries with NAFTA trying to sell a product so extremely differently, and there's underhanded competition, they can step in and reduce that competition. They help get you funding when you need it, so you can increase investment opportunities. They provide effective protection enforcement of intellectual property rights, patents and copyrights. Here in the US, we have the United States Patent Office. And if you haven't gotten patented because you've embedded something, I want you to know it's a bit of work. We're going to talk about it more. I am a patented person. I made an ergonomic computer item. I set it up. It took me actually about 10 years. I didn't really think of getting it patented. So really during the last 5 is when a friend of mine said, you need to get this patented. And so I made a product and went through all the different stages to do the work. It's a lot of work. We'll talk about patents further on when we talk more in the legal chapter. But if you have something you've created, if you are writing music, if you're writing both the sound of it and the lyrics, you need to make sure it gets copyrighted. If you're an artist in the sense of designing artwork, make sure it's copyrighted so that you don't lose ownership of it. And then there's involved with regional trade cooperation, building a framework, and that means different steps to do the work, having a strategy for interrelationships with different organizations, and then always having improved working conditions in North America. So NAFTA helps with all of these different things, making sure we don't have child labor, that as you've noticed, we've had help with them actually with helping with increasing minimum wage. They're part of that. If you need help, they will help. So future of global trade, China continues to grow. They have over 400 Fortune 500 companies. That's a huge, huge number. That means we only have 100. They have over 500 of them invested in China. India, huge growth in information technology. They have grown in leaps and bounds, especially in biotechnology and pharmaceuticals. They have such a large pool of intellectual resources, individuals who are highly educated, and very nicely so also. I mean, I'm so proud of how they have opened the doors for education for men, definitely, but for women, opening opportunities for growth. Russia, they have projected to be the most wealthiest global economy by 2025. But because they have now declining oil prices, it's slowing it down. Not sure what's going to happen because of the pandemic. We're going to see some changes. Of course, they have problems politically with their currency and the social problems because of the communism there. Hopefully that will break down. If it starts to break down, that'll be big. Brazil, 7th largest economy in the world. I bet they're more developed than anyone in agriculture, mining, manufacturing, and the service sector. They know how to take care of each other. They're known because in that way, because really, these are people who are raised in the country. They're not raised in the city, they're raised in the country, and have been taught how to work with each other and make things come together. So the concept of outsourcing. And, you know, we hear this all the time, contracting, outsourcing, where we have one person doing work under contract, different functions. It's usually a temporary thing. We've seen this going on for many years now. Excuse me. And it was really beneficial with some of the third world countries by outsourcing business to them. People got jobs who didn't have them, but it also meant people here in the US were losing jobs. So you got to have some balance with this when you think about doing this. Pay attention to who you're hurting and who you're helping. Globalization and your future. So study languages, take the time, get to know another country, their culture, understand their customs, take global business courses, spend a summer going to school in a different country, go to a couple different countries and do it, or do something like building houses in a third world country that needs them, or hospitals. We saw this especially like during Katrina and other major floodings of different countries. It's a very important thing to think about doing. There are some pros and cons with offshore outsourcing to be considered. Pros, less strategic tasks. So they're focusing on areas in which they can excel and grow. That's a big pro. Another one is outsourced work allows companies to create efficiencies that in fact let them hire more. So let's say they bring in people helping them, it helps them get educated better, which is a very positive thing. And definitely consumers benefit with lower prices. When you improve with efficiency, you will find that it becomes less work. It becomes more productive, and that's what you want to do, and then it will start to cost you less because you find new avenues for doing things. Very, very important. But then you have your cons. You may have a loss of jobs permanently. People may have to move, and then you may have a problem with wages in that country, low-cost competitive issues offshore needs to be really considered. And then the quality of the product may be reduced because you're not overseeing it like when you're seeing it underneath you where you're located. When it's in a different country, you don't always have your hands on, so you don't know what's going on, and that can hurt the company's reputation. Communication. All right, here we go. The cultural things, language, customs, very difficult at times, and that can be more damaging than beneficial. Oh, here we come to the end. Something to think about here. If you have questions, please feel free to send me an email or text, or show up at my Zoom office hours for this course, and you'll have them in your syllabus in Canvas. And you might want to ask your peers some questions or do a little extra research. Don't be afraid though to contact me, and I'll see you in chapter 4. Thanks.